Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever in the world you're watching this. So excited to be here. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I called this show Stories of Serendipity and Synchronicity, is because I've always been fascinated by the awe and wonder of life, like why things happen, and why Mark and I are here on this call today is total synchronicity and serendipity. And I just have always been curious. I've always, since a kid, been like, but why? But why? But how come? And well, how did that happen? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Mark is a childhood friend. We haven't actually spoken in years and years and years, but once in a while we message on Facebook. So I'm really excited to hear from Mark. He's going to tell us a little bit about himself, and then we're going to just see where the conversation goes. And this is being broadcast live on LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. So if you're on any of those platforms, you can type in a comment, and somehow miraculously it shows up here and we can see it and get you involved in the conversation. All right, Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Joan, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me on your show today. This is really exciting. I feel a sort of almost nervous but good kind of excitement, and was really anticipating this all week. As you know, but for the audience, we grew up on the same block. We're in the same kindergarten class.
Malfunction in the junction. So I don't know if it's me or if it's Mark. So let's see what happens. Let's give it a second. If anyone can hear me, type in the comment section. We might have to go out. Mark, if you can hear me, you might have to go out and come in again. Let's see. This is live. This is what happens when you're live. And this is what I would like to tell you, that
neighborhood is Joan on the same block, and went through the Philadelphia public school system, undergraduate at University of Pennsylvania, medical school at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and not long after medical school moved to the New York City metro area. A lot of my friends from college were here. My residency in emergency medicine was at a community hospital in northern New Jersey, just west of Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I've lived in Manhattan since 1988, and have now lived in New York City for longer than I was a Philadelphia resident. And in terms of my career, I originally thought that I wanted to be an ophthalmologist. I couldn't quite tell you how I decided I wanted to be an ophthalmologist. For sure, I wanted to be a doctor because my father, the pharmacist, didn't really want to be a pharmacist, but was guided in that direction by his high school career counselor as both a profession, but also as a good business to be in, because you had a retail operation. And in the 50s, there were no retail pharmacy chains. It was just your corner neighborhood drugstore. And so that's what he was. He was the neighborhood druggist. We lived on top of the pharmacy growing up. So it was really a very neighborhood oriented, honorable career. But he still, I think, would have preferred to be a doctor. And so no surprise that two of the three brothers in my family, myself and my youngest brother Jeff, are both doctors. So we were pushed in that direction psychically, in the same way that lots of kids grow up to do the same thing as their parents. Joan, notably, you're not a plumber. That's probably good. But
yeah, I only know the three things my father always said about plumbing, and that was this. He said there's only three things you need to know if you're a plumber. Don't bite your fingernails. You can see my dad saying this. Don't bite your fingernails.
Totally.
Put paydays on Wednesday, and shit flows downhill.
Good lessons for life in general.
Exactly. You could change that to 3 things you need to know when you're being an ER doctor.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Uh-huh.
So I guess for me, regarding serendipity and thinking about, the things that I would share today, I can without a doubt say that each and every twist and turn in my career has been based on being dealt a bad, or at least I perceive to be a bad deck of cards at a bad hand at any given time, and figuring out how to turn seeming disappointment into something different or better. I'd mentioned that I thought I wanted to be an ophthalmologist, and at the time, and even still now, in applying for training programs, ophthalmology is super competitive, and they usually take the top 5 or 10% of every medical school graduating class as applicants.
I did not know that.
I was not that.
Well, you know what they say. That a medical student that gets C's is called?
Right. Still called doctor. Yeah.
Hi, Alana. Hi, Alani. How are you? Alani from Hawaii is here, and Michael from Escondido, which is in the San Diego area, is here. There's other people. I can see there's other people. They just haven't made a comment.
So, so after not getting accepted to any ophthalmology residency training programs, I had to figure out what to do next. And at that point, the director of the ER at the community hospital that I did my internship at, called Parkview Hospital, which was,
oh my gosh, totally,
in our Oxford Circle neighborhood on Wyoming Avenue. He's a guy who took me under his wing, Mark Rosenberg, who at this very moment is the president of the National American College of Emergency Physicians for the entire country. So he was my original mentor. He took me under his wing and offered me a sort of support role, having only completed an internship at Parkview Hospital, where I worked for a year at the end of my internship while waiting to reapply for emergency medicine residency programs. So he really put he was the wind beneath my wings. Different song, but still the same outcome. He lifted me up, and gave me an opportunity, and really convinced me by showing me that emergency medicine was really a good second choice for me. And thinking back, my life, had I been an ophthalmologist, would have been completely different. I might never have landed in New York, where I've been happy all these years. And emergency medicine really changed my life, not only my career direction. And so after training, I became part of the founding faculty of an emergency medicine residency training program at Beth Israel Medical Center here in New York. And then after, I guess, 6 years teaching and seeing patients, and doing all kinds of crazy stuff in a busy urban emergency department, I got kicked upstairs to my first leadership opportunity, and was asked to be the director of a small community hospital ER that Beth Israel had just taken on as an affiliate, and then continued to sort of get kicked up and out to different leadership opportunities, and 2 other community hospitals in the New York metro area, each one successively bigger and busier than the next. I didn't really think about, did I want to be the boss, or did I want to be a leader? I just got pointed in that direction, offered an opportunity, and I took it. And I think I was successful. I think I left each place better than, the condition in which I found it, and accomplished the, metric driven things that I was asked to do while I was there. But some of those jobs didn't end happily, because in healthcare, roughly every 6 or 7 years, there's a change in leadership at the top. And as is the case in lots of institutions, new leaders want to bring on their own teams. But at each turning point, where maybe things weren't seemingly going so well, my next opportunity always ended up being better than the last in ways that were completely unanticipated. And I've learned something at each step along the way. In 2010.
Wait, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm wondering, since I have a pediatrician daughter-in-law, so on match day, which is ginormous for doctors, you're saying you didn't get matched?
Not for ophthalmology, no.
Okay, so now here you are with like, okay, I just studied this and now I can't get in, well, you have to wait. You just have to apply again.
Right.
But that would be an ego crush, an ego blow, huh?
Oh, sure. Because, medicine, or the pursuit of medicine as a career, is a very long road. And you think, or at least while you're on that road, you think, oh, okay, well, this is really hard. But when I'm finished, I'll have a definite thing to do, and a place to go, and a place to hang out my shingle, and and I'll, in some way, shape, or form, be successful in the world in whatever way you individually choose to measure that. That's not the case anymore. There are currently far more people coming out of training programs than there are opportunities, and as medicine becomes more institutional and corporate driven, it's harder and harder to find jobs. That's not to say that you can't be successful if you try and put your nose to the grindstone, but excuse me, healthcare is a very different world, and is driven by in a different way. It's the individual practice of medicine is on the way out. So most physicians these days are employees in one way, shape, or form, either of an institution or a large medical group, or even more so as the lines between payers and providers and institutions become mixed. Lots of the big payers, whether it's United or Blue Cross Blue Shield, or certainly in California, the big healthcare systems there are driven by payers. Kaiser and Humana, they're payers, or they started out as payers, and so it's a very, very different world.
I heard Kaiser's going to open its own medical school. I have no idea if that's true or not, but
yes, that you heard correctly.
So it kind of reminds me. Well, first of all, I want to say that when you said you got dealt a bad hand of cards, bad card hand, because a lot of people say lemons and lemonade, and so this is the first time I took a time to think about that, and it's true. You have this. You're playing poker at the table. You got this card hand. Now what are you going to do? Right? That you got nothing. You got absolutely nothing. So now what are you going to do? So it's the same as, instead of quitting, it's like you have several options. I mean, I'm not a card player, but you could fold, you could wait, you can bluff, you could win the whole entire thing with a bad hand.
Right.
So I like how you did that. And also, let me say one more thing, and then you can comment. And Michael has a question, so hang on one second. My sister, she was at LVN at Parkview, and it was back in the day when, those of you that are listening that are much younger, she wore the white little cap. She had this dark blue, like scarfish poncho thing. She had the
white kind of.
yeah, that she would wear when I think she walked there sometimes. And then, the white stockings, everything pressed and neat, like an old, like, the nurse Ratchet. But anyway, and she met her husband there. Her husband's father was a patient, and she ended up meeting her husband there. And yeah, so it's just crazy how you can pivot and pivot and pivot, and you're kind of brushing over it. But there were many times in your career that you had to, pivot is the word everyone's using today, but change, think again, take a pause, look back. And then I was thinking one more thing, that how your father's career and your career are paralleling, because he was a pharmacist back in the day when, he actually probably made medicine.
Sure.
Right. And now none of the pharmacists make medicine. It's just like, well, you're about 120 pounds and you're about this. So that's what you got. And so you started in medicine when it was more patient doctor, and it's moving toward patient employer. And your dad started as a small pharmacy, and then the retail big boxes came in.
So true. And there's even more of a parallel, which is the 5 years that I stepped out of institutional hospital-based medicine and started my own urgent care practice, which by far and away is the hardest thing that I've ever done. Starting a business, it was a retail operation. It doesn't, the sun sets, but your business doesn't close, nor do the responsibilities ever end. And then we had a payroll, and we had employees who we paid their healthcare insurance. And Hurricane Sandy comes along, and there's a power failure, and what do you do? Or a pipe breaks because it's 2 degrees outside and there's a flood in the back of your office. What do you do? You don't, we call Frank Kling to come and fix the pipes, but he's in Philadelphia.
Hey, here's the question. Here's a question from Michael. If you're finished, I don't want to interrupt. I don't know. I think maybe you froze again, or maybe I froze. I never know who's frozen.
So it says, so the question is, your experience at medical school and your pursuit of medicine, are there themes of leadership that are discussed and taught? Yes and no. So I was kicked up and out into a leadership role. And unfortunately at that time, didn't really have a mentor. And so this was 1994. There really wasn't any online opportunity. Nowadays, there are plenty of people who finish medical school and then decide to go get an MBA or a master's in public health, or get yet another degree based credential that allows them to grow into a leadership role. And so and there's a difference between being a manager and being a leader, and even just being someone's boss.
Definitely.
Those things are sort of built into the medical education hierarchy, in the form of what's called, in the trade, see one, do one, teach one. And so everything that you do in healthcare is experience-based. So now there are any number of formal training programs to help develop leadership. Only when I, was out in the world through the American College of Emergency Physicians did I have the opportunity to take advantage of a formal training program about how to be a teacher in healthcare, which included some leadership training. But that was certainly not in the basic medical education program by any stretch of the imagination. It was something that I had to seek out on my own. Excuse me, it wasn't offered to me or required of me. I just figured it out.
Now, but you think more in today's medical schools, they're doing more holistic?
I don't think it's part of the medical school curriculum so much as in order to pursue any sort of leadership opportunity, because it's so much more competitive and developed, and because healthcare in and of itself has become much more institutionally based within hospitals and large healthcare institutions that are, multi-hospital companies, corporations. There are often internally leadership training opportunities that are offered to people so that they can home grow their table of organization.
I like that, table of organization. I've worked for the government most of my life, and we call it an organizational chart. Yeah. But,
That.
I always say if I were to be a doctor, I would be in the ER. I just think it would be the absolute best place to be. And it reminds me also of so how do you turn it off?
So in emergency medicine, you really don't have any patients that are primarily your responsibility. Depending on the kind of hospital, for example, if it's a community hospital, most people have some affiliation with a local physician who's either their primary care doctor or their OBGYN or their pediatrician. And so there's always, or I should say often, somebody who is responsible for them away from the hospital. But you don't have anybody that's your own patient, and it's shift-based. So, the saying that we always had was you can't stop the clock, right? So whether your shift is 8, 10, 12 hours, you show up, you take sign out from your predecessor, and then at the end of that time, you try to wrap up as much as you can, and you sign out to the next person, and make dispositions for as many people as possible. Do they need to be admitted? Do they get to go home? Do they still require some period of observation? But it's it's very much a jack of all trades kind of career. You have to be a specialist in everything that's unanticipated healthcare needs, in terms of any illnesses or injuries that might show up on your doorstep. And so you need to know the first, 10 things to do about all of that and come up with a diagnosis, and at least a temporary plan if they're being admitted to the hospital. But you're not a master of any of them. You're not a trauma surgeon. You're not a cardiologist. I can't take somebody's appendix out, but I, know how to figure out whether they have appendicitis. So it's very, very interesting way to spend spend your career in healthcare, because you get to really do a little bit of everything. And, like most jobs in the world, it's, the 80-20 rule applies. So, 80% of the time, it's kind of the same thing day in and day out. 10% of the time, you're, biting your nails, even though you're not supposed to, hoping that this will work out. And then 10% of the things are kind of awful and, terrible. But it's, you can't stop the clock. And so at the end of the day, you go home, and there are always things that, eat at you in the form of woulda, coulda, shoulda. Maybe things went very well that day, and you can come home, proud that you saved a life. Although most of the time that's not the case. It's really very, very, variable in terms of the things that you do on any given day, and in terms of the career opportunities that are available. You can be a teacher, you can be an administrator, you can be solely a clinician. There's opportunity in in emergency medicine to be a subspecialist in, say, toxicology or trauma or ultrasound. So there are a lot of different career pathways within emergency medicine to do different things that might make it more interesting for you on any given day.
Today there are.
Yeah.
Back in the day, no. And
no,
then do they all? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, back in the day, you were an ER doc, and you were definitely a jack of all trades and had to do everything.
Mm-hmm. And some of those things that you mentioned, in case anyone's listening, do not need a medical degree, right?
True.
Yeah,
True.
which is nice.
Yeah, and especially now there are many more opportunities for the general term would be advanced practice providers. So physician assistants, nurse practitioners who have taken on a much greater clinical role in providing care at every level, whether it's primary care or specialty care. In our hospital now, there are whole services that are, the day-to-day in the hospital are run by nurse practitioners and PAs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Since this is my Serendipity and Synchronicity show, sometimes spirituality comes up, because I have another show on Tuesdays that's focused on first-time leaders. So sometimes spirituality comes up, and I wonder if you see a lot of people struggling with their spiritualness, their mortality, their how did I get here? I deserve this, whatever.
Sure. So in my current role as an emergency physician in the urgent care center at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, the urgent care center is, for all intents and purposes, an emergency department. It's called urgent care because if you're legally designated as an emergency department, you have to be open to the public 24/7 and provide all sorts of different services, which we are not. We always tell people that show up with chest pain and turn out to have a heart attack, we're a cancer center. We're not a heart attack center. And then we have to transfer them across the street to Cornell. Anyway, we see, terribly sick people whose cancer treatment generally isn't going well. And so for the most part, we take care of cancer related illness and cancer treatment related complications. The people whose care is going well generally don't need to come into the ER, but for any form of cancer, and there are lots of them, some that I've never heard of, because every day somebody comes in with a new kind of cancer of something that I didn't even know existed. There's a lot of people who who are not on an upward path. But one of the things that I've learned is that anybody that comes to our hospital and lands in our practice is largely trading quantity for quality, as we say. And so people will do and survive and tolerate really all sorts of poisonous chemotherapy, radiation, surgical procedures to get extra days, weeks, and months of their life, and really under extraordinary, conditions for what they have to deal with, the sickness and the tubes and the, in and out of the hospital. It's really daunting. And it's a different kind of relationship than I have ever had with my patients before. Now we do see people over and over again who are in and out of the hospital. There's an incredible sense of gratitude and resilience amongst these people, unlike any patients I've ever taken care of before. In most hospital emergency departments, there's a fair mix of people that really need to be there, and coughs and colds and flus and whiny, cranky, whatever is bothering anybody on any given day, which doesn't necessarily need to be in an ER if they only had a primary care doctor or, another place to obtain care. And in any general hospital emergency department, probably somewhere between 15 and 20% of the patients end up being admitted. If you're 20% up, that's a super acute hospital and, very busy. At MSK, probably 60 to 70% of all the people we see end up being admitted. So a very sick population, and patients who are, generally grateful, thankful, and they're at our hospital for a reason, which is usually because either they have something incredibly complex, or they need some clinical trial, or something that the general, even other university hospitals in town don't necessarily offer because of, what kind of cancer that I've never heard of before is afflicting them. So, I think to be on the receiving end of that deck of cards, hand of cards, for those patients, there's got to be a very deep-seated willingness to survive yet another day, and whether it's religious spirituality or some other form of how am I going to get along in the world through the next few days, people are very deeply invested in the will to survive.
It's amazing. I speaking of rare cancers, I had cancer in my eye. And very few people get it. It's very deadly. So I am, I'm a walking miracle. But
yeah, hats off to your doctor, whoever figured that out for you.
Crazy.
Wow.
I got to tell you, my optometrist, long story, but he's the one that first diagnosed it.
Sure.
He looked like he had seen a ghost. He just was like, there's something in there and it's not good. Like, I have been seeing this guy for like 15 years.
Lucky you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, in the end, I don't know if I can be the person that takes another treatment after another treatment after another treatment. But Michael has another question. Let's see what it is. How do you see cancer treatment in the next 5 years?
So the same things that made Operation Warp Speed and development of an mRNA-based vaccine for COVID are apply to cancer treatment. And so there are currently various immunotherapies that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago and are cancer specific, as well as gene therapy and identifying mutations that allow cancer cells to thrive. Those things are all under tremendous amount of worldwide research and development, as well as just technology has allowed for much greater collaboration between previously singular and work alone silos of research around the world who didn't necessarily know what other people were doing. So there's a lot more, collaboration between private enterprise, pharma, and traditional, white coat institutional, academic institutional research. So I think, I think all those things combined will, as well as being able to identify cancers much earlier, will really have a big change in survivorship, and maybe even cures for certain types of cancer. So technology is really generating a tremendous change in the way these things are approached. There's been a tremendous increase in cancer survivorship in the past 20 years. A lot of that is due to people just not smoking cigarettes so much anymore, and less lung cancer. But all those advances in immunotherapy, gene therapy, with regard to both identifying and diagnosing and treating cancers is going to make a big difference in the next 10, 20 years. I think we'll see a cure for certain types of cancer.
That's great. Hey, so then COVID hits. I wanted to talk a little bit about COVID and then maybe end with us reminiscing about childhood. But so COVID hits, New York is hit, so tell us how that was as a physician.
So in short, it was really messed up. I mean, bad. And I wasn't even in a bad place. But I have colleagues who were. And so, throughout your career in emergency medicine, in my career, every day I'd walk into the room of somebody who's coughing with a fever, and whether it was flu or some other respiratory virus, I was exposed to this on a daily basis, and nobody wore masks. I mean, even for flu, it's like, I'm tough. I have resistance. I'm immune. I get my flu shot, and I've been exposed to all the things in the world over the past 20 years. So, mostly it wasn't something to worry about. However, being in New York and at the an international crossroads with people on a daily basis coming into New York City from all over the world, there's plenty of opportunity for contagion and scary things happening. So, for example, after 9/11, there were all sorts of terrorist threats, and whether it was nuclear or biochemical weapons. 9/11 was a pretty scary time to be in healthcare in New York City, and there was a huge step up in our institutional emergency preparedness and drilling and and getting ready for scary things. So there was, from that time forward, there was a much greater awareness, and consequently and simultaneously a much greater awareness of all communicable illnesses, partly driven by various strains of the flu, but also by things like SARS, of which COVID is a form of SARS, and then more recently Ebola. And so we did training with PPE and gowns and respirators, and but most of that was around Ebola, which for the most part didn't really ever show up in the U.S., although there was a case of Ebola here in New York City that was from a healthcare provider who'd been in Africa. I actually took care of, just thinking back, in probably 98, I took care of the first case of bubonic plague diagnosed in New York City in over 100 years.
Wow.
People visiting New York City from Albuquerque, New Mexico, they lived in the suburbs, and in the Southwest, plague is carried by the fleas that live on prairie dogs. And so this husband and wife who lived in suburban Albuquerque happened to come to New York, and as we quickly realized, had been bitten by fleas of the prairie dogs on their property with bubonic plague. So you think about all these things, and then COVID comes along, and it was scary mostly for what we didn't know. There's all this political talking that's been in the news about, like, whose fault was this, and did it come from China? No, it didn't come from China. It came from Europe. And the truth of the matter is, it sort of came from everywhere, and we didn't know it. They didn't know it in Seattle, where the first cases were. Nobody knew, because this was a new virus, and I don't think anybody really knew how truly contagious it was. So so there were clearly cases circulating in the U.S. Probably in late February and certainly in early March. Just a funny story. On March 10th of last year, I had tickets to go see the 50th anniversary Allman Brothers show at the Garden. It was probably going to be the last time that the Allman Brothers ever performed together. So it so happened my kid runs into a piece of playground equipment, bites his lip, needs stitches. My wife and babysitter took him to a friend of mine who's a plastic surgeon. They sewed up his lip. I pop in at home on my way from work just to check on him. I go to the show. 10 minutes into the show, my phone starts blowing up. Sam has chewed through the stitches on his lip. We got to take him back to the doctor. I leave the concert. And for all I know, that could have saved my life, because who knows how much COVID was circulating at MSG that night. So, excuse me. Let me just get a drink of water. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Sorry about that. I should know better with the water by now. But anyway, yeah, we just didn't know. And, you know, most hospital financing is reactive to things that are unanticipated. So no hospitals had enough PPE around. There was a community general hospital ER that I was moonlighting at, because at MSK, you know, my full bag of tricks isn't put to use, because we take care of a different you know, a different array of patients. So I moonlighted at this community hospital in New Jersey that was not particularly well resourced. And my last shift there was on March 9th, on a Monday. And I decided, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen in the next few weeks, but it didn't seem like that was a good place to risk going to work, because I knew that they, you know, wouldn't have adequate PPE and such. Turns out the guy that I signed out to that night on March 9th, 3 weeks later was dead. Was the first emergency physician in the country to die from COVID. Yeah, so, you know, so it was scary, because we didn't know what was going to happen. You know, we had plenty of PPE at my hospital. Cancer patients were very at risk. The regular cancer treatment sort of dropped off the map. And for the first probably 2.5 months, really till like mid-June, we were all COVID all the time. And yet nothing like what was going on in the, you know, in the general hospital ERs, where people were lined up in hallways on gurneys, not enough ventilators, and New York quickly became a, you know, a scary place. It was a ghost town. People, there were, you know, on a normal day walking around New York, you hear all sorts of different international languages being spoken, tourists from all over the world, and New York closed up shop overnight. So the streets were deserted. In that way, it reminded me of the, you know, weeks and months following 9/11, and people were dying. It was scary.
Oh my gosh, we were seeing like newscasts of just, it just reminded me of Auschwitz a little bit, like this, just these bodies and bodies and bodies coming out.
Yeah. Oh, and it's still going on in the world. You know, we're pretty good in New York now, but I mean, India,
yeah,
mega disaster.
Crazy how it took them almost a year to get caught up.
Yeah. So I think in the US, for the most part, we're in a pretty good place. We got to, you know, convince people that it's okay to get vaccinated, that the government isn't trying to control you.
Or implanting something.
Yeah. But, you know, big picture, this is you know, am I my brother's keeper kind of thing. Like, we're all in this together. We got to take care of each other. You know, the best way to do that, I think, is for, you know, for people to, you know, get vaccinated and consider the risk of not getting vaccinated to be that much, you know, that much worse. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, oh gosh, your words a year ago really stuck with me. You were telling me what was going to happen with COVID. And I said to them, yeah, by the end of this, everybody will know somebody personally who died from COVID. Everybody will have a story of somebody that, was their family member, coworker, colleague, your dry cleaner down the street, or, somebody that firsthand who either passed away or, a family member, a first degree relationship was affected. So this is bad stuff. And I think we're getting to the light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, in New York City and around the country in emergency medicine, it's been a challenging year for sure.
Can't even imagine. So I'm thinking of all the things you went through. So you were probably just entering medicine during the AIDS crisis.
Yes. Yep.
And then we've come a long way with that. And then 911 and
yep.
now this, and it's crazy.
Yeah. And, talk about serendipity. I also say that this current job, which I didn't even know that there was an urgent care center at MSK until, we sold our urgent care practice. I went to work for New York City Health and Hospitals as the chief of a public hospital ER. And then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. Two friends of mine were patients at MSK, and they said, "Oh yeah, they have an ER." And I was like, "What? Wait, they have an ER there?" "Yeah, it's called urgent care." And then it turned out that the mom of one of my son's nursery school friends was a PA at MSK, and I asked her. She's like, "Oh yeah, they have an ER. It's called urgent care." So I said, "Wow, that's so interesting. Can you hook me up? Can you give me the email address of the chief?" And she did. And so I've been there for a year and a half. And talk about serendipity. It's the best job that I've ever had. It's the first time in 30 years that I've been doing straight patient care and no longer have any administrative, managerial, or leadership responsibilities. So I go in, I do my thing. It's incredibly rewarding and also perspective shifting because I go to work and all of my troubles melt away because I don't have cancer and whatever's happening to everybody around me is infinitely worse than anything on my plate that day. So, so it makes me grateful as well. And I think this job may have saved my life because
I was thinking the same thing.
Yep. So, that guy that I signed out to, who, I think it was in his mid-60s, dead. And I have other colleagues who became ill with COVID, some of them very ill, some of them not so much. But you and I are in the same age group, and COVID is not kind to people our age.
No.
And so if I were working in a general hospital ER in any capacity, I could have been in deep doo-doo if I'd become ill, and knock on wood. I escaped. I didn't even, I don't know how close I became to getting sick, but interestingly, every single one of my colleagues, and for that matter, most of the nurses, anybody at my hospital who got COVID, didn't get it at work. They got it at home.
Wow.
Family member brought it home. Definitely community acquired rather than healthcare acquired.
Wow, that's crazy. And then could you imagine if you were the chief for the county, worked for the county or the city of New York as the chief ER person during this?
No, I can't imagine.
No.
And I am so grateful that I was able to change gears before this came along.
No kidding. No kidding.
So yeah, doesn't make any difference what you want to call it. Lemonade from lemons, hand that you're dealt. At the end of the day, it's up to you as an individual to dig down and be resilient and committed and figure out, what comes next, and how am I going to figure this out? And at least for me, every step backwards, whether it was voluntary or otherwise, I've been very, very fortunate to be able to take 2 steps forward to make up for it. But almost always in ways that were unimagined until I had to really think about what am I going to do with this?
Well, you have a lot of resilience, and I'm sure your father in the pharmacy also had a lot of shifting to do. And so I wanted to end up with some stories of the pharmacy. And he got this ice cream. There wasn't always ice cream, but then
Yes.
there was this ice cream freezer. And right. And he sold, I can remember exactly where it was. Of course.
Right.
Of course, I do have food issues. I am a food addict, but the first time I ever saw Breyer's ice cream was in that freezer, and you take it home, and it had the little black vanilla chips in it, or vanilla,
the best beans,
right?
Yeah.
And every time I see a commercial for that vanilla bean, I'm just like, oh my God, the Melrose Pharmacy. It's true. And then now you go to get ice cream. I don't know about in New York City, because you probably don't have any big supermarkets.
There's some, there's always opportunity to get ice cream.
Oh my God. It's like, it's an aisle long.
Right.
The different kind of ice cream you can get. And then, so that's a really good memory. And then the other memory is, I guess I was in maybe 6th grade, and Margaret Neely, who lived next to me, I don't know if you remember the Neelys, they,
Sure.
And I sold pretzels in front of your dad's store.
Yes.
I said to my mom, I think, what if we sold pretzels, and where will we sell them? And so she said, well, you have to go ask Mr. Melrose. And it's so cool that someone on Facebook said something about Mr. Melrose. That's what we did. We called everybody by their first,
of course,
and so I walked in and said to your dad, do you think I could sell pretzels outside your store? And he was like, okay, so I think we did it a couple times. So
totally. Set up the card table with a cigar box.
Exactly. Yeah. So much fun. And I just loved how and it's almost like it prepared you to live in New York, how your apartment was above the store.
Yeah. Well,
and
we were
going up the stairs in the back. It was just so cool.
Yeah. Well, we were city kids. We had concrete playgrounds, right? Playing in the back alley behind the houses. Playing box ball and wire ball and all those backyard games was awesome. But that was our neighborhood playground.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And it's possible that I may have stolen 1 or 2 pieces of candy from your dad's store. I just to make amends for that, and I'll send you some money. Remember, we had candy. Penny candy was right at the level of a child.
Believe me, I understand, and they have been similarly guilty of such things elsewhere in the neighborhood. I think we all have those confessions in our back pockets, just part of growing up. Until you get caught, then it's
no kidding.
The fear of God.
Then it's not good. Yeah.
No. And I similarly remember, we were one of the few Jewish families on the block, and so we, had Hanukkah, but we definitely had, a lust for all things Christmas, and so there was the music on the PA from the beer distributor across the street, 24/7 playing Christmas songs. Do you remember that?
Not funny. No, I do not remember the music.
So the beer distributor, because we lived across the street, had Christmas songs playing 24/7 outside. From maybe not 24/7, but certainly from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 at night. But the cling part of the story is that, because your sisters babysat for us, we would always come to your house like in the afternoon on Christmas Day and like check out all the new toys. And sometimes we got to come over on Christmas Eve and throw some tinsel on the tree.
And then I remember one time being at your house. I think we came for a couple dinners and going, wait a second, you get presents for 9 days?
Yep.
We get presents one day, you get presents for 9 days? Oh my gosh. Well, do you remember taking any like abuse or what we would today call hate crimes from being Jewish in that area? Because that's what comes to my mind about the beer distributor. Did he do that on purpose?
No, and that was one of the beautiful things about our neighborhood. I mean, it was a very white neighborhood, but but I kind of feel like, when you were a kid and and truly a neighborhood where people relied on their neighborhood, on their neighbors for the hardware store or the grocery store or the plumber or the electrician or the pharmacy, or the dry cleaners. Like, there was a strong sense of, belonging to your community. So no, I don't recall ever experiencing that, that growing up on our block, at least. I think everybody got along pretty well. There was other stuff that went on, but that was mostly just kids being kids.
Well, it's funny. Here's John Higgins. Now, if this is the John Higgins I went to grade school with, that is funny because I don't know. I posted it on St. Martin's. I tried to post it on St. Martin's and Little Flower. I think it got messed up on St. Martin's because I figured.
Oh, Paul's Hardware, our hardware store.
Where was that?
On the corner of Loretta and Alcott.
Oh, yeah. Loretta and Alcott. Well, today they talk about walkability, neighborhoods that are walkable. And I was thinking about our place. We had yours, we had the dry cleaner. I think next to the dry cleaner was a mechanic.
Yep. Auto parts store.
Auto parts. So then there was the beer distributor. Then there was the hardware store, the deli.
Yep.
And
Phil's shoes.
And Phil's shoes. Phil's shoes.
Yep.
What a difference to go into a shoe store. And then I don't know if you ever went to I think he was on Augusta maybe, and he was a shoe repair guy. He was a little bit out of our neighborhood on like Devereaux maybe, or one of the side streets, and Schisler or something. Crazy.
John says, and you were in band together, trombone.
Oh my God, John. Oh my God. We're going to have to catch up after this. I'll tell you, true story. I loved playing the trombone, loved it. And I hated being in the band because it was a masculine instrument and people would laugh at you when we were in all these parades and, he's saying Schisler and Conley is where this old guy in the shoes, like, it's amazing. John, is it not amazing that our parents would let us go in there alone? It was this really old, creepy guy way in the back. I mean, the place was little to begin with, but it was like something out of Hogwarts or something. And you would go in there and pick up your shoes. Man, we were allowed to do all kinds of stuff. But people would make fun of you when you were in the band. And if you at St. Martin's, if you played an instrument, you had to be in the band.
Right.
So I quit because I couldn't stand all the people laughing at me. Yeah.
I had a similar experience playing the trumpet. I played the trumpet through 9th grade, and then in high school you had to be in the marching band, and that was it. No marching band for me. End of the trumpet.
And nowadays bands are kind of cool. At least you have more people that are in the band. but we can close up. Is there any parting thoughts you want to tell anybody, or, you know, anything you want to end up saying about serendipity, synchronicity, and being a physician and where you ended up?
Yeah, just it's you know, the world is not an easy place. I think it gets harder and harder, even even the more experienced we get. And the last thing that I'll end up with, that I remember saying as part of my dad's eulogy at his funeral, is Mark Twain. This is a quote attributed to Mark Twain. He said that when he was a young man, he thought his father was the most stupid person on earth, and he was amazed as he grew older to learn how much his father, how much smarter his father had become as he got older. So yeah, so hats off to our dads and moms and all the people who, you know, make us smarter. Just take every day, try to learn something new, and, you know, and see where serendipity takes you.
Oh my gosh, awesome. I'd love to have you on my leadership show to talk about some of the setbacks and how you overcame them. Yeah.
Sign me up. This is super fun.
For first-time leaders. Okay, awesome. Okay, what's going to happen now is I'm going to end the stream, but you and I will go back into the green room, so to speak.
Sounds great.
Okay, John, I'm going to hook up with you later. Talk to you later. Okay, bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.